So yes, this is a first look at the brand new Garmin D2 Air Aviator smartwatch. Instead of me just sitting here for the next 10 minutes and kind of going through my thoughts and my opinions on what this watch can do, I put this post up on my Instagram account asking you what you wanted to know. So I'm going to just do this as a big old Q&A, and then once we're all flying again, I'll obviously give this a full test back when we're up in the air in Echo Yankee Zulu. Nick94, who says, explain like I'm 5, what does it do? Well, in a nutshell, Nick94, this is an entry-level smartwatch aimed at pilots, but also for people who've got an interest in aviation, to be honest. Main differences between this and some of the previous iterations of some of Garmin's watches is this one is touchscreen. Now it will interface with some of your other Garmin gear, things like Garmin Pilot, Garmin Connect. I'll come to that in a second, but it's a well-built watch. Its lens is made from Gorilla Glass. It comes with 2 strap options as well, which I really like. The one that's attached to it when it's in the box, which is the leather strap, but you can change it for this silicone kind of plastic strap, which I actually much prefer because I use this watch when I'm running, so I prefer having the silicone watch strap instead of the leather one. Nick Mackers, how much is it? Well, Nick, it's around that 770 to 790 Australian dollar mark, which when you compare that to a lot of the aviation watches that are already out there at the moment, it's like less than half price. And on that then, Jacob Samba, is it worth the cost? Well, you can decide that at the end when you've seen all the features, but this, from a pricing point of view, kind of sits somewhere in between. It's a little bit more than an Apple Watch and a lot less than a top-end Garmin Aviator's watch. Ben Iceberg, does it connect to Garmin equipment in the flight deck? Well, yes, not directly. You can't basically send directions from your Garmin watch directly into something like your GTN 650s or your G1000s. But if you use Garmin Pilot as an interface, then yes, you can pass flight plan changes, for example, from your Garmin Pilot app to your Garmin D2 Air watch. So yes, there is an interface between the two. You can also do things like a direct to function here on the D2 Air, where you can type in the name of a waypoint or an airport that you want to do a direct to function, and it will give you information on that direct to, sending that then to your Garmin avionics in the aircraft through something like Garmin Pilot. I haven't tested that yet. That's a good one, which I'll test, like I say, in a future video once we're flying again. 2 questions here that kind of are asking the same thing. I fly aviation. What are the main purposes of an aviator's watch? And WooChild27, why do I need a pilot watch? What differences does it have to a regular watch or phone? That's a good question. This isn't like an aircraft instrument. I always consider these devices as they're a support item, perhaps a backup in the worst case scenario, but this is a support to the existing technology you already have in your aircraft. For example, some of the functions on here, things like the fuel tank switch reminder function, that's really good. You can set this. I switch my tanks after the first half an hour, and then every hour after that point onwards. So I can just set this on my watch, it will vibrate, I'll have a look and see why is it vibrating. It will either be a message from my wife, or it will be the watch telling me that there's a reminder to change the fuel tank. So that's useful. Things like logging time directly from your watch into your Garmin logbook. If you use that as a digital logbook, a lot of people are moving away from the paper-based ones now. You'll be used to this if you've seen a Garmin watch before. You've got your typical sort of exercise options: run, bike, navigate, but if you scroll to the top, there's a fly option, and if you click on the fly option, you can log a flight in the exact same way you would be logging something like a run or a cycle ride. Now, whilst this watch can also give you information on airports, frequencies for the ATIS, for ground tower, etc., that's all built in. METARs are on here as well. Whilst that's on there, I wouldn't necessarily use the watch for that in flight. I'd use the iPad, which I have with me at all times. And in terms of navigation, yes, whilst I said this watch can do direct to functionality, it will also even do things like display your magenta line, so it will show your course deviation on a GPS course. That's all really cool, and it's fun to have that on your watch. Would I use that in flight? Probably unlikely, because I basically have my primary certified instruments in the aircraft already, which are displaying that for me. LB Worthema, sorry. Can you get METAR on it? Yes, as I mentioned before, you can get METARs. It's actually pretty cool because one of the watch face options has METARs on the left-hand side. So I've just got Moorabbin in here as my local airport. If you swipe across to the right, then you can see a bit more of a detailed METAR on that airport. AK14102, I'm not going to read all those numbers out. Does it work in the water, and if so, how far can you dive with it? Yes, it does work in the water. I don't have the official waterproofing rating on me, but it does have a swim function where you can track your swimming on this. So if it had the swim function and it wasn't waterproof, I think that's a bit of a mistake from Garmin. Henry D. Yandel, does it measure oxygen levels like the new Apple Watch? Yes, it does, which I'm actually really excited about, and I'm looking forward to testing that in the cockpit. I normally use one of those oxygen saturation level monitors which clips onto your finger, but that's in the aircraft at the moment, which is more than 5 kilometers from my house, so I can't get to it. All you do is swipe down, you keep it on your wrist for a few seconds, the little blue thing goes around the outside. You see that? What do we got? 95%. Why is it so low? SIAG Aviation Travel, is there a moving map? No, there isn't a moving map. And I think that's one of the big differences between the D2 Air and some of the other more advanced Garmin Aviator watches. There's no moving map on it. So you can't see your position. Well, you can see your GPS position, but you can't see that overlaid on top of a moving map. So no, it doesn't have one of those. I'm really grateful for all the questions that I got, but the questions I got for this watch, well, I got so many of them, so I'm just trying to find the ones. Here's the next one I wanted. Joshua Sedji, is it simple to understand and start to use out of the box? Yeah, Joshua, I actually honestly found it very simple to use, and I think a lot of that is to do with the fact that it's touchscreen. You're not trying to navigate via a bunch of buttons around the outside and trying to work out which button is the right one. Once the screen is on, you're just tapping around it like you would an iPhone or any other touchscreen smartwatch. So give yourself about maybe 5-10 minutes to get used to the menu system and the interface, and yeah. It's not that difficult. Caden Aviation, does it track steps like a normal Garmin, or is it specifically for aviation use? Yes, Caden, it does. It does track steps. I've used it on several runs around Melbourne over the last week or so whilst I've been testing it, and it works exactly the same as the Forerunner 935, which is the watch that I've been using up until this point to track my exercise. It also interfaces through Garmin Connect through to Strava as well. It's also got the other classic features built into it, things like when you stop, you can set it to automatically pause, so it won't actually affect your overall pace and timings. And yeah, I haven't, to be honest, from tracking exercise on the Forerunner 935 compared to tracking exercise on the D2 Delta, I almost called it, on the D2 Air, basically no difference. Oh, the other cool thing I should mention just on running is, and I haven't done this yet, but you can also interface this with a couple of music players, like Spotify is one of them. So you can download music to the watch, and then if you Bluetooth that to whichever headphones you're running with, you can download music and listen to it directly from your watch. So you don't need to carry your heavy phone around with you whilst you're running. Sean Sotra, can it suggest how to perfect landings? Yes, Sean, there is a button on here that tells you how to do a perfect landing, but I haven't used that yet because I don't need it. Brian Major, Australia, how long does the battery last? Brian, I've had this watch now for a week and I've charged it once. The Garmin claim is 5 days, I think, in between charges. I reckon it's more than that. Generally, the battery life on the Garmin products or the Garmin watches is fantastic, and I think the D2 Air is going to be no different. A.PWRS, why would I choose to get this over the D2 Delta? Your reasons are probably going to be price would be the main one, because it's a lot cheaper than the D2 Delta, and it also has a lot of the functionality that the D2 Delta has, except for some of the core things like the moving map functionality. So if the moving map and positioning isn't as important to you, but you just want some of the aviation features along with, you know, like I said before, the exercise features and all the other stuff that comes on the watch, if that's enough for you, then I reckon the fact that the price is, well, what, it's less than half the price of the D2 Delta top of the range version, that's why I think you would choose the D2 Air. TGM Aviations, good question this. Would CASA allow you to use it in the cockpit? Well, the fact that it's a watch and you need to have a watch in the cockpit for some styles of flying, IFR for example, you need to have a working timepiece. Yes, CASA would allow you to use this in the cockpit. I don't think that they'd allow you to navigate or use this as a primary navigation instrument in the cockpit, but to use it as a watch in the cockpit, of course. Hang on, I have to borrow my wife's Apple Watch, one sec. All right, got the Apple Watch. Thank you, Jack. This was from M. Williams 2101. Size functionality, how does it feel on the wrist? This is the D2 Air. This is a Forerunner 935. And I can't put this on because my wife's wrists are much smaller than mine. But this is the Apple Watch as a comparison in terms of size. So this is how it looks. Apple Watch. You see that? There we go. Hope that answers your question. It's smaller than the D2 Delta, but it's slightly larger than the smallest Apple Watch. Very scientific review, Steph. Well done. Fletcher Short, is the watch worth getting for a new student pilot? There's actually another question along similar lines. Yeah. Vishnuk PK _. Hey, Steph, do you recommend the Garmin D2 for aviation students? If so, why? Okay, good question. If you're learning to fly, just starting out as a student pilot, just hold off on getting that fancy aviator's watch. I know Garmin have sent this to me and I'm hoping to do some work with them in the future, but I don't think you need an aviator's watch when you're just starting out with your flying. Spend the money on your flight training, spend the money on fuel. You know, money is precious in those early days of training. So do you need a watch like this to fly with? No. So it does beg the question then, who would this watch be for? Well, if you're a private pilot like me, you're just flying around for fun, then I reckon this watch can be a pretty cool addition to your list of things in the cockpit. I can then use the same watch for all my running and exercise, and I can just have it on my wrist as an everyday watch as well. With insane battery life, remember that, way better battery life than anything you'll get from an Apple Watch, then yeah, I think this is a really good option for you. And just for aviation enthusiasts, if you're into your aviation but you might not actually fly, still, this is a good option because yeah, you can get real-time weather information, you can play around with the aviation functions, and when you're traveling on a commercial plane, you can go to things like the altimeter and you can see exactly how high you're flying. I just think that's really cool. Okay, before I go, I just want to go through a couple of quick improvements that I'd like to mention, things that I'd like to see in future updates of the firmware. First of all, UTC time. Someone did ask a question, does the watch show UTC time? Well, it does. See if you can find it here on this watch face. It's actually this tiny little yellow arrow up the top here, which you can see ticking around the outside. So at a quick glance, it can be hard to see that UTC time. What I would love to see is some new watch faces designed for the D2 Air, which have the current local time and UTC time side by side. I'm sure that will come. The D2 Air is brand new, so no one's really designing watch faces for it at the moment. The second improvement I'd like to see, you know those METARs I showed you before, it's really useful to have those, but there's no date on there or time for when that METAR was published or in fact when it expires. So it'd be really good to have, you know, just something, this is 30 minutes old or this METAR expires at this time underneath, because I'd hate to think that anyone would make a decision based on METAR information that's old. So please, Garmin, can you fix that one? And also the final thing that I'd like to see is on the altimeter, which is awesome, and I can't wait to try that in Echo Yankee Zulu. I think I can only set it to inches as opposed to hectopascals, and as we know, measuring barometric pressure in inches is just wrong. Hectopascals is the way you should be measuring it. So I couldn't find a way in the settings to flick between the two. If you could add that as well for everyone outside of North America, that would be amazing. Thank you. Apart from that, love the watch. Thank you for all your excellent questions. Thank you, Garmin, for sending me this excellent watch. I genuinely really like it. And let me know in the comments below, what would you like to see me test on the Garmin D2 Air in flight next time, when I ever get to fly Echo Yankee Zulu again. Otherwise, thank you as always for watching. Don't forget to click on the subscribe button if you're new to the channel. Otherwise, thanks guys. I'll see you in the next video.